Welcome to Interesting Choices, the podcast where we take a look at obscure films and other media to see if we can make some sense of the choices and hopefully make some recommendations. I'm Sky.
I'm Kate.
Hi, Kate.
Hi, Sky. How are you doing?
You know, surviving, which is good. Good enough.
Are you doing okay in these most interesting and strange of days?
Funny you should mention that.
So what are we talking about this week, Sky?
We're talking about the movie Strange Days.
Okay. This is a really forgotten movie, honestly. This kind of came out at around the same time that a lot of pre-millennial cinema and media came out. It was released in 1995, and it is about New Year's Eve 1999. Like, the events kind of like lead up to the turning of the millennium.
Yeah, it's set December 29th, 1999. And I'm not going to be pedantic about it. Someone was pedantic about it in the IMDb trivia that 2001 was actually the turn of the millennium, but 2000 is still a big deal. They were making a big deal of it. That's all that matters.
I do remember those very interesting days leading up to it where everyone was freaking out about Y2K. There was just all this angst about the end of the world.
Yeah, of course, they couldn't have known that in 95, but it's always funny to see a movie that's set in the far off, not so distant future of 20 years ago.
That just means we're old, Sky.
But yeah, I definitely remember being like huddled around the TV watching the ball drop, waiting. Thankfully, my parents didn't succumb to a lot of the paranoia. I do distinctly remember us having just like 5 1-gallon water jugs in the garage just in case.
Yeah, I think we did the same. I recently started watching Lance Henriksen's masterpiece TV series Millennium, which also takes place in the like late 90s leading up to 1999 and the turn of the millennium. It started in 96. So it was kind of in the zeitgeist in this late 90s time period. Everyone was just very anxious.
Yeah. So this movie came out in 95, but it's set in 1999. And this is just another movie with an absolutely stacked cast. Ray Fiennes, Angela Bassett, who's just absolutely stunning in this role. She's just bringing it home in every scene she's in.
Juliette Lewis, who was kind of the girl for like late 90s, early 2000s, and then just disappeared.
Yeah, she actually did all her own singing in this movie.
She's a great singer. Tom
Sizemore, a wee baby-faced Vincent D'Onofrio, Michael Wincott, even some of like the background players are people. Richard Edson, pretty, I don't want to say famous, but a really solid character actor.
And behind the camera, also the heavy hitters, right? You've got Kathryne Bigelow, who basically just knocks it out of the park in almost every movie she does. It was written and produced by James Avatar T2 Cameron. This movie is amazing, but you kind of expect it to be. Like, this is one of those cases where it's not just like a horrible train wreck of a film that has infinite money and star power thrown at it. Oh, what about that cough? Anyway, yes. I really enjoyed this movie. Like, I loved it the first time. It is so relevant these days.
Yeah. First time I saw it, I was a little disappointed with the ending, which we'll get to. But looking back on it, it really has it. I think it might have been either a studio note or there was just a sense of that weird optimistic naivete of the mid 90s going on there. But otherwise, yeah, just a really, I don't want to say predictive, but
I mean, it's not predictive. And that's kind of the point. It's that these problems have always been here with us. It's just when times are good, we can kind of just ignore it. And when we're distracted by other things, we can kind of just ignore it. But like, they'll always be there festering. But let's get in and start talking about this, this really great piece of cinema.
Yeah. We start out with a POV shot, one of many in the movie. They actually developed a camera, Lighthouse Entertainment specially developed their R&D department, a camera that was light enough and could get the kind of angles that would resemble the human eye, because this is supposed to be from a person's point of view of 3 guys in a car discussing a robbery that they are going to commit in just a few moments.
It's an interesting thing to watch now in the like post YouTube GoPro era.
Yeah.
Like half of the things I watch are these first person videos of people doing like sports or outdoors activities just with a GoPro strapped to them. And it is this first person extreme adrenaline, like doing wild things that like a normal person can't do. And it is predictive in this regard. Like, wow, it's a thing. But yeah, so these people are planning this robbery of what we later learn is a Chinese restaurant after they go bursting into it and start like
robbing it,
like rounding up all of the staff, grabbing all the money out of the register, putting all the staff in the big walk-in freezer. And then just about as they're like ready to make their getaway, sirens and flashing lights, and then they are surrounded.
So we get a really solid point of view chase. And first time I saw this, even the second time, until I read up on it, I thought this was one long take. But apparently there's a lot of hidden cuts during the camera swipes. And it was just like a very technical scene to shoot. But they did a good job of making it look like someone was in a panic and they were running away from police.
This is a really solid, like, faux oneer. And it's amazing because it's so seamless. Like all of the cuts are like, oh no, I've stumbled and I'm looking at the ground, or oh no, I've like swiped past this door frame. Unless you were specifically looking for it, it just looks so perfect and feels very real. It feels like the human experience of just this one unbroken, continuous flow of events that just spiral and spiral into the culmination where the two thieves are running up to the roof of the building. One leaps across a gap. The other tries to leap.
He attempts.
Yeah, it makes the attempt, but then like catches the ledge and then falls to his death. And you see
smash cut,
like sort of digital static, and then a very sweaty Ray Fiennes.
Mm-hmm. Ray Fiennes at, I think, the weaseliest I've ever seen any human being.
He's so unwholesome in this, like, but in the way that, like, he's a good-looking guy, and so they couldn't make him look too strung out and like too low down. So he is your street hustler who puts on a good front and pretends to be far better off than he actually is, but like
somehow represented by wearing just the worst suits ever.
Yeah, he's a degenerate in every sense of that word, and he wakes up sweaty with this like colander thing on his head.
Right, it kind of reminded me of one of those head massagers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have one of those. They feel real weird, and I like them.
But yeah, he's understandably upset. We find out that he's basically a drug dealer. They don't say that, but that's pretty much what it is. He deals in experiences recorded by equipment called squids, whose acronym escapes me, and I cannot find it written down anywhere, so I would have had to watch the movie again to pick it up. Yeah,
it doesn't super matter. It just means it's just a like thing that records memories,
sensory input, just in someone's experience, and he buys those recordings and sells them to people on the black market. Yeah, he's gonna have to fiddle with this one because watching someone or experiencing someone's death is really jarring, and he has to cut it out, so it's just gonna cut to black, and he's upset about that.
He makes the point of saying he does not deal in snuff films. I forgot what he called, like blackjack, but he does do everything up to that point almost.
Yeah. Then we get a nice long, one of the best uses I've seen of like a montage for exposition. We just quick cuts of him wheeling and dealing, exchanging experiences, explaining what the technology does, what it's for, why people would want it, to prospective buyers. I'm assuming investors too, but
This movie does a great job setting up the world during that montage because it shows him wheeling and dealing in the seedy underbelly of Los Angeles nightlife in both shady clubs and in like higher end venues. But then it also intercuts to the street where it's basically military occupation. There are people running rampant in the street doing all sorts of crimes while police are just randomly like smashing people down. It's chaos and anarchy, but he kind of just floats above all of it. And all he's just interested in is hustling his digital drugs and making a score.
We cut to, we don't know her name yet, but her name's Iris. She is running from some cops.
2 police officers are chasing this lady who looks dressed up a little bit provocatively. We later learn that she's a prostitute, but she's fleeing from them, running through crowds. She makes it down into the subway.
Vincent D'Onofrio at his probably the most terrifying I've ever seen him in William Fichtner.
I think D'Onofrio was a little scarier in The Cell, but that's just because he was a little bit more like weird Cenobite man.
I haven't seen The Cell, so that's also
Oh, yeah, it's a great film. And he's a little bit straight up more serial killer-y in that.
Yeah.
Wasn't he also in Men in Black?
Yeah, he played Edgar the Bugman.
He was pretty scary in that one, honestly.
I don't know. It came off more as funny to me, but that's another story. She manages to hop onto the subway. D'Onofrio busts out a window and grabs her hair, which is revealed to be a wig. And it shows that she was recording everything up until that point. Because the squid headband thing comes off with the wig.
They make no pretense about hiding what they're doing. They kind of give the dispatcher a bit of a like super racist cover, being like, "Oh yeah, we're chasing a middle-aged black man, so don't worry about it." And then they run down this girl and then like shoot out the windows of the subway car as it like takes her away. They do not give a fuck. They establish very clearly on that these officers do not care about the law and do not care who is hurt.
It is very apparent.
After she escapes, we cut back to Lenny, who is now in his sort of local bar where he hangs out, and he meets up with a client, I believe.
Yeah, a kind of yuppie looking guy. This is the talk part. He kind of explains. He gives him the hard sell. Or not even the hard sell. He gives him the slick sell.
Yeah, he's like, "Oh, what kind of experience do you want? You can have everything." And he's like, "First one's free."
That's the first one's free thing.
Yeah, and he takes him into a back room and like puts the like little headset on him and plays this clip for him, which you never really get to see, but you get to see the client's reactions.
Yeah,
and it's wonderful. He's just like just like rubbing his chest and like And Letty's like, "Yeah, that one's just an 18-year-old girl taking a shower, but now you know." And I'm like, oh, buddy. Like, my life would have been way easier if I would have known how good it was to be a girl taking a shower.
I think it's, pretty much immediately someone comes up behind him with a gun to his head.
And he's like, "You're under arrest, blah, blah, blah." And then the client runs out and Lenny turns around and it's his buddy Max. Who's
just Tom Sizemore, very much looking like Brent Spinner from Independence Day.
Yeah, he has this like long wig on. He looks like a roadie.
Yeah.
But he is a PI who used to be on the force with Lenny.
We find out they're both ex-cops.
Yeah, Lenny used to be a police officer in the Vice Department.
And Lenny's understandably upset that Max scared off a client.
But whatever, he doesn't care because Lenny's good at the hustle, and he can sell anything to anyone. And so while they're hanging out inside, you see Iris running through the streets, running up to Lenny's car, and then dropping a mini disc in the moonroof thing.
Yeah, all of the memory discs and the players, the handheld players, because the headband's just part of it. There's a handheld player that the disc goes into. They're all played by retrofitted Sony mini disc players.
I love it. Honestly, the mini disc is the coolest looking media delivery device.
Yeah, an inspired choice for that prop.
It was. Like, they never got popular enough in America for people to become familiar with them. Like in other places, like in Japan, they were relatively popular. Like I think in parts of Europe,
it had kind of long legs in the UK, if I remember right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but in America, never made any traction. So they still looked exotic to most Americans, and they still do to this day, because after that, when media went digital, it just went to like, flash drives and things that you couldn't see. But this was kind of the last vestige of cool looking physical media.
It's this sense of like futurism, but also retrofuturism without being retrofuturistic. I don't know how to describe the kind of aesthetic it evokes, but it's such a great choice for this. And yeah, she obviously recognizes Lenny's car and drops the thing in. Unfortunately, his car gets towed.
We learn that after he goes out to it, but before he does, she runs into the club and says, "Hey, I need to talk to you, Lenny. There's something in your car. I left it there for you. You need to see it." But then she is scared off. He finishes up his business with Max, and then his friend Mace, I think, is there as well. She's this cool black lady limousine driver.
Bodyguard, played by Angela Bassett, Lornette Mason, who should have her own show, let's be honest.
Honestly, she's the coolest character in this whole fucking movie, and I love her so much.
Yeah, Mace on ABC.
Yeah. She goes off to do her job or something, and then he goes off in order to drive off to this nightclub. But before he can get there, his car is towed away, and he tries to bargain with the tow truck driver. And he's like, "Oh, yeah. Here, just give me a couple minutes to go get some cash for you. I can write you a check. Oh, no. Here, take my Rolex as collateral." And you learn that those two lines, the "I will write you a check" and "take this Rolex," are kind of stock and trade in Lenny's arsenal of shady things to say to people.
Yeah.
But the driver's not having it. His car gets towed away along with the mini disc that has whatever Iris wanted to tell him. So now he's without a ride. He needs to go meet up with some clients, and his first thought is to hit up Mace.
Yeah, he is the quintessential mooch friend.
Yeah. She's had a lot of his nonsense over the years, and so she's like absolutely done with it. I don't want you doing any of that wirehead stuff. Apparently, people being addicted to these virtual relived experiences is a problem in future Los Angeles.
It's only really explored a little bit.
But it's enough of a problem that she's aware of it, and she doesn't like him trafficking in it.
Yeah, especially not in her limo.
Mm-hmm.
You get the sense that they've had a pretty long history together.
Yeah, but he cajoles her into taking him to the next location where she's going to. She's like, "I got to go pick up a customer." And he's like, "All right, I'll go with you." And she's like, "You can get a cab from there because I got to take this customer." And he's like, all right. He immediately gets out of the car and sees his old boss coming out of the hotel where he got dropped off. That's where we learn that it's the police commissioner,
Palmer Strickland, which is just the perfect last name for commissioner, played by Joseph Summer.
You see between the two, there is There's some tension there. The police commissioner doesn't really want anything to do with him. He's a disgraced cop, but he's like, oh, no. I'm just here to pick up my friend, Mr. Some Japanese name. I forgot.
Japanese executive man.
Who was the client that Mace was supposed to pick up. And so already spinning his hustle. Oh.
Yeah. He's going full con man. It's not super explored. You kind of get the sense that the commissioner sort of viewed him as someone with a lot of potential who ultimately betrayed that potential by choosing the path that he's on now.
Before they can really get into it, he goes and immediately starts hustling the customer.
Who turns out is not only into it, but he not only plays the game, he's got his own console.
Yeah, he convinces the customer that he is Mace's boss, who's along for a ride-along, basically, and manages to also hustle some of his brain drugs, who this guy is a willing and an eager connoisseur of.
Like, this is really where I got the sense that he's like a cocaine dealer or something like that, a coke dealer. So he's dealing to people on the streets. He's dealing to celebrities in the back of limos or bigwigs in the back of limos.
Mace is very unhappy when the customer is like, my friend Lenny here has told me of a new place. So instead of going to my destination, let's go to this nightclub where Lenny wanted to go anyway.
Oh, yeah. She is what I can only describe as seething.
She is so incredulous that he just manages to get away with all of this nonsense constantly.
Yeah, he's like the worst kind of people person.
One of the reasons he's so desperate to get to this club is because his ex-girlfriend is performing there.
Yeah, and she is dating a record exec, the girlfriend played by Juliette Lewis as Faith Justin. Mm-hmm. And the exec, Philo Gant. I don't remember them saying his name.
Yeah, they say it a couple times.
I think they say Gant. That's what I remember. But yeah, Michael Wincott at his least gravelly.
Yeah, sometimes they call him Philo, and it makes you very confused because I don't think they say his full name together that many times. They either say Philo or they say Grant, and you're like, who are you talking about? Gant. Yeah.
I keep thinking Grant because I'm Grant, but
before he goes to the nightclub, immediately after his initial purchase of the robbery turned snuff film, he goes home and puts the trodes on his own head and experiences his memory, first person, of a person who is having a beautiful day on Venice Beach with this beautiful woman who's roller skating, and then they end up going home and having sex, and you find out that it's Ray Fiennes and Juliette Lewis.
Yeah. And he's literally addicted to reliving the good times.
Yeah. His girlfriend's name's Faith, and he's there in his feels the entire time, just on his bed in his suit. And
one of the many worst suits imaginable that he wears.
Yeah. In any other movie, this sequence of, oh, it's the good time with the person I love would 100% be about someone who died, right? Like in John Wick, in Johnny Mnemonic, in like everything. It's this like, oh, I have a video, this first person video of someone telling me how wonderful I am and like how much they love me and how this one day is the perfect day.
It's really bright. Everyone has perfect hair and skin. There's a lovely soft vignette around the shots.
Yep. But in this movie, you immediately learn that no, Faith isn't alive. She just dumped his ass. Or she's not dead.
She's in fact alive, got a dye job, and became a singer.
Yeah, I was like fully set up for her to be dead. I was like, oh yeah, that's why this guy like fell on some hard times, and that's why he's like this burnout like hustler, is because like the love of his no, she just left him for somebody who was better.
I mean, she probably left him before she met him, honestly, considering Lenny.
Yeah.
She probably just had too much of his shit one too many times.
100%. They were together, I think, back when he was a cop on the Vice Squad. And we learned that the reason that he has this stuff and is so hooked into this network is because LAPD or some police organization developed this as a way to wear an invisible wire to record things. And so he was one of the first adopters of this technology and saw the the potential for its abuse.
Yeah. Thinking about it, there's way more applications for this that are just not explored. They don't even really mention the movie, just stuff I was thinking of, like, you know, maybe you could use it for, like, learning or training. Like, is the experience good enough that you can develop muscle memory for things that you haven't actually practiced?
They show one interesting application of it where he is selling to a man who is disabled, who lost his limbs, his lower limbs. And he's, you know, reliving someone's experience of running along a beach and then meeting a hot girl.
Yeah. It felt a little ableist, but I can understand where they're coming from with that.
Yeah. For that person's character, maybe that's the thing that they wanted, but you know, it's bad for them. Like, I can see that. Like, right?
Yeah.
The entire problem with this drug is that it gets you hooked on experiences that aren't real and that you need to leave behind or not partake in and get sucked into and just live your own damn life. And that's kind of the problem with all of the people that end up using this is they just can't do that. They can't move on.
Yeah, but he has it out with Iris and Gant, and they're having none of his shit. He's doing the whole "I love you, come back to me" desperate boyfriend routine.
When he meets Faith and Gant in the club, Gant is in full, like, sleazy music producer mode, but he kind of looks like a drug kingpin.
Yeah.
He's sprawled out on the couch with the cushions in just like the open shirt. If you told me those two were vampires, I'd be like, vampires.
Yep. Believe it. Vampire drug kingpin. Definitely.
She doesn't really want any part of him, and Gant really hates his guts. But Gant is currently having to deal with the fact that one of his star acts, because he's a record producer, this rapper named Jericho 1, who is the equivalent of, I don't know, like a Travis Scott or maybe even like I don't know, somebody really big. Whoever is popular right now. I'm too old to keep track of that.
Very much the Tupac of that and the movie's time.
Right, but also very much a community organizer who has been using his fame and fortune in order to, like, bring gangs together to do political activism, to hold the police and the city and people responsible. He's driving a lot of social justice things using his platform, and so He's been recently murdered. Yeah, he was recently murdered. It's still unknown who did it. So Gant, his label, ran Jericho 1's career, and so he's dealing with the repercussions of that in the only way he knows how. Ladies, drinks, hanging out at the club. Yeah, he gets a mysterious disc at some point during all of this. While he's sulking in the limo drive away from all of it, plays it. And I feel like we should slap a big old content warning right here. Yeah, it's a lot of first-person assault, both physical and sexual, and just like some real fucked up stuff. Yeah, I don't get physical reactions to movies a lot, but this made me pretty nauseous. Yeah, it's a lot. And it's, to the film's credit, it does not portray it in the sort of... it's not sensationalized in a good way. Right, yeah. It's meant to be queasy and disgusting. Like, if you compare this to something in the sort of torture porn genre of like horror movies where they kind of like relish in a lot of that sadism, this is yeah, it's ultimately brief, but it's stark and brutal and lingering. Yes, it is a punch to the gut that you as the audience are meant to feel, and Lenny, the character, is taken down by, because it is his friend Iris basically being like someone breaking into her hotel room, and then a masked man of some sort who assaults her, like ties her up, puts a squid on her, feeding directly a live feed from him. So she's experiencing him doing these things to her, which is just like a whole nother level of ugh. Yeah, it's super fucked up. Sexual assault happens and then murder. He
positions her face so the camera's looking at her eyes, and it zooms out and cut to Lenny scrambling to get out of the cab because he got a barf, which I completely understand.
He is appropriately concerned. He tells Mace to immediately take them to that hotel, and when they get there, they see Iris's body taken out on a stretcher.
Yeah, and she's very obviously dead. But together they sort of figure out that whatever Iris tried to give him earlier is probably related to why she was killed.
The detective he decides to take the disc to the dealer that we saw at the beginning, who was trying to sell him the snuff film, who is this like... you could call him like a hacker bro guy living out of a van. He's
kind of doofy and he has a really 70s look about him. It's, oh gosh, I said his name earlier and now it's escaping me. His name is Tick in the movie, Richard Edson. He's got like a bowl cut and like the flower print with the big lapels, wide open shirt, gold necklace. You get the sense that like if this was a meth relationship, he would be the cook and not the face. Right? Yeah. Like Lenny's the guy that is out on the street hustling, selling the product, but this is the guy that like knows the science, he knows the engineering, he's out there like sourcing this stuff. He looks like he lives in his workshop van. So they look over the tape and he's upset because he also knew Iris. And then they learn that whoever this person is, they are colorblind. There's some sort of weird visual anomaly in the recording. And I believe at this point they decide to take a field trip to the good old impound lot. Yeah, they go to the impound lot. Mace, God love her, she's just like, like she's done with this bullshit, but she is still being supportive through all of this. Like, I think if it was anyone else, they would have just like, no, fuck you, fuck this. Yeah. And at this point, the audience is like, why the hell is she risking her job, her safety, all of these things for this like loser hustler? But to their credit, they give you a flashback of, the worst day of Mace's life where she comes home from her nursing job. I think she's like in scrubs or something. I thought it was a waitress outfit, but I could just be misremembering that. Some job where she's not a bodyguard. Yeah. There was an entire story between this flashback and the present day that I wish we could see. Yeah, she's so cool. But she's coming home to her, like, Los Angeles house, and there are police swarming the place, and her boyfriend is being perp walked out of the house by a bunch of cops, and she runs in like frantic looking for her son. And she gives him a piece of her mind while he's being walked out. Yeah. She's afraid something has happened to her son, but she sees him sitting in his bed. Next to him is a much cleaner and more respectable looking Lenny. Yep. He has not yet adopted the Paisley Peacock suits that will haunt his future. But he's been, hanging out with the kid and making sure he's okay and befriending him. And so despite her misgivings, she has a special place in her heart for this like cop who has stepped in to help her and her son. Yeah. I still think she should have kicked him to the curb, but whatever. Yeah, but sometimes, you see the good in a person and then you just want to bring it out of them. You want the best for them. Yeah, because she's seen him at his best and at his worst. Yeah, seeing him at his worst is just like heartbreaking for her. So she goes along with this, and she even like they break into this impound lot where there's a junkyard dog. And she just like straight up maces it. Yeah, they find his car and they break into it. And that car is a 1997 prototype lent to the movie by Mercedes. So it's like a 2-year-old car in the timeline of this movie. He gets the disc, he slips it into his pocket, and then as soon as they're about to exit the impound lot, a pickup truck pulls up. Mm-hmm. And these two gentlemen come out. And it is the cops from earlier, Vincent D'Onofrio and friend, William Fichtner. They basically hold them at gunpoint and say, give me the disc. And Lenny opens up his briefcase,
takes out a disc, gives it to him, and says, "Here, just let us go." But these being the corrupt cops they are, that's not good enough. And so they're about to shoot them. At which point, I think Mace grabs one of their guns, and then Lenny just like runs away.
Yeah, they get into her car and they try to back away, but they end up at the end of a dock.
Yeah, like her entire car is bulletproof because it's a limo made for execs. And so they've been shooting at it. She's like, "Don't worry about it. This is what it's made for." But they shoot out her tires. It like kind of skids to the end of this like pier. And the cops kind of pull up and they're kind of trapped between a rock and a hard place.
And then they break out, or by they, I mean D'Onofrio and Fichtner break out the gas, Olean. They're going to solve the problem with some vitamin G.
Yeah. Lenny is unsurprisingly freaking out in the car as they're soaking it in gasoline and then setting it on fire. I thought the car had been disabled at this point because, like, they didn't move while any of this was happening.
The cops kind of blocked the dock off with the truck, so there wasn't really anywhere for them to go. But then they get caught on fire and, you know.
Yeah, they could have just rammed the cops. I would have rammed the cops. So they get caught on fire, and Mace is like, "Okay, no other choices. Let's do this." She puts it into drive, accelerates right off the end of the dock into the water.
Out of the frying pan into the bay.
Yeah, the car is no longer on fire, but is now sinking. Their oxygen is depleting. The cops are standing up at the top of the dock, watching the water, and Mace is so cool.
She gets her shotgun out of somewhere.
I think she had it in like a bag in the car.
Yeah. Leading back to your, why didn't she run over the cops? Why didn't she shoot the cops?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she was strapped the whole time. Like, she actually did shoot one of the cops, and she like put like 5 or 6 rounds right into his chest, but he was wearing a bulletproof vest.
But yeah, she blows out the window and they get out of there.
The cops end up giving up because they think, oh, well, they're probably dead. At which point, wet and bedraggled, they're walking home, I guess.
They get over to her brother's house.
Yeah, and she's like, "I can't believe you had to give him the disc." And he's like, "No, I didn't." And he pulls out of his pants because, of course, he did, because he's Lenny.
He pulls the old con man switcheroo. I don't know if they reveal what disc they did give him, but I kind of want to know.
It was one of his favorites with Faith.
I was hoping it was I was hoping that was an opportunity for a joke.
He makes them as cops. He recognizes that cop walk that a lot of cops have. And so...
Yeah, they were in dress suits the whole time, which... For some reason, I thought they had been promoted to detectives since we saw them last, but it's been like less than a day. So they were just wearing suits in a pickup truck in LA. He figures out they're cops. They kind of have the "we're exhausted" moment together at Mace's brother's house, and they check out the disc.
We see him put it on, and then kind of come out of the fugue, and he turns to her and says, "You need to see this. This is important." And she's like, "I don't mess with this stuff. I do not want to do this." And he's like, I just have to show you. This is important. Yeah. It sucks that this is the first time that you have to do it, but like, this is important. And so he puts it on her head and they start the playback.
And it's from Iris's point of view. She's in the car with Jericho 1 and another prostitute and another guy.
One of his entourage.
And they're just cruising, having a good old time until they get pulled over by the LAPD.
Yeah, and specifically the 2 cops that have been pursuing all of them the entire time. They drag everyone out of the car, and they rough up the 2 black men and put them down on the ground. But Jericho 1 is like, "What's your name? I'm rich. You're going to get sued. I'm going to send all of my lawyers against you, and you're not going to get away with this because this is just police brutality." At which point the officer is like, "Oh, you're that guy that has been causing all of that trouble for the department. Yeah, you're not going to do anything." And just shoots him, just executes him in the street.
Iris books it. I can only assume like this is where we came into her life at the beginning of the movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they also execute the other sex worker and the entourage guy.
So Iris is the sole survivor, and she's on the run, and there's essentially video evidence of the LAPD committing premeditated murder.
Yeah, of a very prominent political and like cultural figure. Mace is understandably upset because this is a nuclear bomb that has been dropped in her lap.
It's kind of been expressed earlier in the film that a lot of the unrest right now stems from the fact that he was killed at all. And this is the match. Essentially, they're holding the disc that is the match to this powder keg.
Immediately after, they're like, oh, we need to go to Tick to find out what he knows about this. Maybe he can like give us more information on it or make a copy or something. They go to his van with Max.
Yeah, they squat up with Max. They showed him Iris's tape, and he was reasonably disgusted.
And I guess we didn't mention it earlier, but Max has been working for Gant as Iris's tail. Like, ostensibly, he's like another one of the bodyguards, but his job has been to...
It's one of the... Yeah, jealous husband jobs.
To tail Faith. We keep mixing her up with Iris.
Yeah. Well, I like Iris more.
Yeah, to be fair. At first, Lenny was upset that his friend was taking a job, basically stalking his ex. But then Max is like, no, bro. I'm here to protect her from the evil guy. So I'll stick to her like glue and like, don't worry, I will take care of her.
For you.
While also collecting money from this guy you don't like.
But they get to Tick, and he has been rendered a vegetable.
So one of the things that you can do with these squid headset brain jack things is if you crank up the signal too high, you can basically fry someone's frontal lobe.
Yeah, and that's what happened to Tick.
Yeah, he's rendered insensate. All of his senses are overloaded with like garbage static, and he can't differentiate the real world from whatever's going on in his head.
And they sort of let Max in on the whole story. And Max sort of lets slip that there have been whispers about organized squads within the LAPD who are there to basically be death squads.
What a weird piece of fiction, and not like a real thing that happens.
Yeah, it's ultimately a red herring, but it was such like a huge, like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Moment.
But then in 2020, we learned that there are
police death squads.
There's so much in this movie that it's like, oh, this weird sensationalized future somehow is not sensational enough for our real horrible reality. And
yeah,
it's awful, but it deters them from going to the police. They're like, oh yeah, we can't take this to the police.
Lenny kind of thinks he'll be able to trade the discs to Gant for giving him Faith, roughly enough.
Because Faith has been feeling pressured this entire time. She knows about Iris. She knows that something's going on. She knows that Gant's a part of it, and that she's in danger. And Lenny has figured this out, and he keeps trying to go see Faith in order to extract her from this bad situation. And so he's playing White Knight at this point. Like, constantly running in, getting beat up by Gant's bodyguard.
Honestly, out of this whole movie, my only problem was this, just because it kind of blends together with every other time this happens in the movie. So I have a hard time parsing them out in my head. But
yeah,
honestly, everything else is just...
Yeah, he does it too many times, honestly. Like, it just happens over and over, and this sequence is going a little too long. We also almost completely forgot about, at one point after he gets beat up by Gant's bouncer for harassing him and Iris, he goes home to recover, and as he's recovering on the couch,
he finds a disc.
Yeah, he finds a disc, and then he plays it back, and it is the first person view of someone breaking into his house while he's asleep and recovering, taking like a box cutter, lightly pressing it against his throat, and then like walking away.
Yeah. And he's understandably freaked out by that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's why he goes and immediately like runs off to Mace. And then again, when he tries to approach Faith in Gant's nightclub studio thing, he is rebuffed by her. She's like, I don't love you. Just leave me alone. You can't save me. At which point he is sent down to the basement to be murdered by Gant's thugs.
Yeah.
But Mace saves him again because she is amazing.
Mace badasses up that whole room, and I really wish there were more scenes like that in the movie, but like that's just a me thing. The movie's like, it doesn't feel lesser for not having those scenes. I just want more of that.
Yeah. She earns the ire of his thugs, and she gets her own like antagonists, including this like real buff like white lady and with like white lady dreads.
Grinch fingers, I remember someone calling them. But yeah, she's a model. This is, I think, the only thing she's ever acted in.
Okay. All of this kind of comes to a head when they decide to rescue Faith from Gant, because we know things are bad. Lenny suspects Gant of being involved with Iris's murder because Iris came to Gant for protection because he was the one that sent her to spy on Jericho 1 in the first place.
Yeah. So then we get to the last sequence. Big New Year's blowout thrown by Gant for the city's elite at a swanky actual real hotel.
They're both dressed up. Mace and Lenny are dressed to the nines in order to infiltrate this swanky party.
Lenny's actually wearing a decent suit for once.
Yeah, but in the streets of LA, you see like literal tanks, military vehicles,
APCs.
Yeah, police with batons just out beating people on the street for fun. People not rioting, just doing like purged level crimes.
Yeah,
it's chaos. The powder keg is
primed.
Yeah, it's sizzling at this point.
The whole party outside the Millennium Party was an actual rave thrown by the production company where they charged people $10 a head to get in. They got Testament, Aphex Twin, a bunch of other bands to actually play, and then they just filmed all of it. And they shut down Sunset Boulevard for 2 days.
Wow, I wish I could have gone to that because that sounds dope as hell.
That sounds bananas.
Yeah.
I think I read like 10 people OD'd on ecstasy and had to go to the hospital.
Perfect. It felt like a rave. It felt like this bacchanalia, but with a tinge of frantic, manic energy.
But when they get there, Lenny has a change of heart and he gives the disc to Mace and tells her to get it to Strickland.
Yeah. Well, like Mace basically gives him an ultimatum. She's like, I love you, Lenny. Or no, she's like, I respect you, Lenny, and I know what it's like to care a lot about someone that doesn't feel the way the same way about you. But if you trade this disc, which could be the most important piece of media in modern history, for this girl, I will lose all respect for you forever, and we're done.
Yeah. I say change of heart, but he kind of has to be cajoled into it. He's like just kind of the worst.
Yeah. And he initially walks away with the disc, and you see her there with her heart broken, and she's like, is this man that I've like devoted my life to numerous times
and energy, and emotional energy, and
Is he just not worth it? But then he proves himself to be worth it. He comes back, puts a disc in her hand and says, that man over there is my ex-boss. He's so uptight. But if there's an honest cop in all of LA, this is the guy, and give him this disc. And she's like, I am a black lady. I do not trust the police. And he's like, okay, you may not trust them, but please trust me. This guy will do the right thing. Please just do this, because otherwise, if you like release this out, it will cause the city to explode. And this is the least horrible way we can get justice for someone.
Yeah. And then we get up to Gant's penthouse.
Yeah, so he gets up to the penthouse and you see that it's trashed. It looks like it's turned, and you're like, oh no, what's happened to Faith? She was there because there were some shots of her there. Did something happen? And then he finds the disc that's addressed to him, and it's addressed to his last name, which is weird because like I'd forgotten it at that point.
Yeah, his name is Lenny Nero.
Yeah.
And everyone just calls him Lenny.
Yeah, everyone calls him Lenny. And so the envelope says Nero, and you're like, who the hell is Nero?
Lenny, don't take that disc. It belongs to Nero.
Yeah. Which, in retrospect, is a little bit too on the nose of an aptronym. You know, literally fiddling while Rome burns, but like, whatever.
Yeah. But he watches it, and I'm going to throw up another big content warning here because it looks like it's Iris Part 2 starring Faith.
Yeah, basically, Faith is on a bender. She's dressed up very nicely, but she's upset at being locked up in the penthouse. She smashes some bottles. She like starts trashing the hotel room, and then someone comes in, and yeah, it feels like Faith Part 2. I think she's in bed when he comes in, and like he ties up her hands and he blindfolds her and puts the trodes on her head, and it's a virtual replay of what we saw earlier. And disgusted and terrified, Lenny tears off the headset before the end.
It's pretty apparent that it's the bedroom of this suite. He runs in and he rips the sheets off the bed, but there's no one there. And then he sees Gant collapsed in a beanbag chair.
He's shocked because this entire time he thought Gant was the murderer. He was like, oh, this guy's definitely evil. He's gonna kill my ex, and I need to save her from this guy. But he's there. The same thing happened to him as happened to Tick. His frontal lobe is a Slurpee, and he's just sitting there, and so confused.
They get a neat effect from Gant's point of view, brain fried, so they just put a ton of different effects on the screen, obscuring Lenny's face. So he finishes the disc.
And you see first person that after quote unquote rape, the assaulter carefully uncuffs her, takes off her blindfold, and they're like, oh, that was a good time. It was good to see you, Max. And then he turns and he looks in a mirror, and you see that it's his friend Max.
Yep. It was Max most of the whole time.
I think at that point Max just like appears.
Yeah, he's just there in the doorway with a gun. In a tuxedo.
Yeah.
Which looks really out of place with his hair.
Lenny's like, oh, okay, you set me up. You set me up to kill Gant because you knew that everyone would know that I hated him and that I was fighting with him. And Max is like, yep. As Gant's bodyguard, I found you up here, and I had to defend my boss. And Lenny was not having it.
It turns out that Gant had been using people like Iris sex workers to keep tabs on all of his artists, which is how the disc got made in the first place of Jericho 1 being killed. Because Gant was paranoid, but he was also addicted to experiences. And he hired Lenny to have Iris killed.
Or he hired Max.
Max, right. And Max then figured he could kill Gant and then frame Iris's murder and Gant's murder on Lenny.
Right, because Philo also wanted to remove Faith because she knew too much. But Max was like, no, what if I didn't?
Yeah, what if no?
And while he was tailing her, they'd gotten together as a couple. And so they decided to frame Lenny for all of this and walk away. Faith is like, it's unclear exactly how into this plan she was and how much she was just kind of like being tugged at by forces that were out of her control.
It kind of feels like she was mostly on board. I don't know. I was kind of distracted because they did that weird kiss thing where she's into it, but he's still kind of looking at Lenny holding a gun while making out with her.
Yeah, it is the classic like villain kissing the girl thing. But then when Max is about to like plug Lenny, Faith intervenes and is like, don't do it. There's a struggle. Lenny and Max fight, and then they wrestle around. He pulls at Max's hair, which reveals he's been bald.
we knew it was a wig because we have eyes, but then they reveal in universe in the movie it is also a wig.
Yeah, because he's been basically wearing trodes the whole time. Because they established that pretty early on that one of the best ways to cover it up is with a wig.
But probably one of the cooler moments, set up and payoff moments, I think. Max pulls out a knife, manages to stab Lenny in the back, and then they smash a window out onto the balcony. Max gets knocked over the side and grabs Lenny's, I think, tie.
Yeah, his tie.
And then Lenny pulls the knife out of his own back and cuts his tie.
Yeah, Max plummets to his death, smashing into the roof of a car down below into the party area where we rewind a couple minutes because we forgot to talk about it.
Yeah, this is happening. His thing is happening simultaneously with Mace.
Yeah.
On her mission.
So after getting the disc, Mace goes and corners the police commissioner guy in the bathroom and says,
in the bathroom,
please, sir, you need to watch this. This is important. This is like super important. I wouldn't be bothering you if it weren't. She gets escorted out after having handed him the disc and the player.
D'Onofrio and Fichtner shot. We didn't mention their in-universe names. In-universe, they're Officer Steckler and Engelman.
Yeah, Steckler and Engelman.
Just the dorkiest names.
Angel Man and
Stickler.
I don't know what Steckler means in German. So after she's kicked out of the nice party in the hotel, she's roaming the streets at the
out in the rave,
the millennial rave, and she is made by Steckler and Engelman. They see her and they immediately beeline towards her.
Yeah, and
there is a pretty epic chase through the crowded streets of downtown LA where they straight up just like pull out their guns and just start shooting people in a crowd who are just like in their way.
Yeah. They corner her and she just wrecks shop on both of them.
She knocks one of them out with a pistol and then like
managed to get her hands on a baton.
She like gets him in a chokehold, uses him as a shield, grabs his taser, tases the other one, like batons him, and then like handcuffs both of them together, and then like one of them to a like scaffolding thing.
Yeah, some kind of gantry thing.
Yeah, unsurprisingly, the crowd is like, holy shit. And all the police come in and they're like, they see the scene. They're like, there's this black woman who clearly has beaten up and like, you know, handcuffed these two police officers who are on the ground. So they do what police officers do and they immediately just start beating up the black person. Like, this is a pretty brutal scene of her like getting beaten down to the ground.
That was a rough watch.
It was. And because like this is supposed to be her like crowning moment of awesome, right? Like this is her moment of triumph, but she doesn't even get that. She just immediately just gets beaten to the ground by the police. There is that moment of like her on the ground where the crowd is like incensed. And a child will lead them, is like, hey, leave her alone, and then jumps on the back of one of the officers. A full-scale riot occurs around her, at which point, like, the columns of, like, riot police come in, led by Strickland, and yeah, they come in.
And he's like, arrest those two men, which I like. It's great in the movie, but I laughed out loud because it's such, considering the times we live in today, is such an unrealistic moment.
No, it absolutely would not happen these days. He would have destroyed that tape and maybe transferred those two to another department.
Yeah. And as it is, Engelman shoots himself. Steckler pulls a gun and is about to shoot Mace, but then the other officers shoot him, which, again, probably wouldn't happen.
Never happen. After all this, Lenny comes down through the crowd, and he sees Mace. Mace is injured. They go over to get medical treatment. Strickland's there, and there's kind of like a little...
They have a moment.
They have a moment. You know, they're like, oh, what's going to happen? Are we going to be okay? And he's like, oh yeah, they'll probably just bring us down and question us for a little while, but we'll be fine. Don't worry about it. It's just the like, yeah, these two police officers died and like, you're directly responsible.
And you're involved.
Yeah. But like, don't worry about it. because I'm a white dude, and so that's a little bit weird. But yeah, we finally get the point, the moment that we've been waiting for the entire time, where all of the sexual tension kind of like coalesces, and you're like, please. And
the New Year's ball drops, and Mace and Lenny kiss.
Yeah, and you're like, oh, Lenny, you finally figured it out. Like,
you big dumb idiot.
Yeah. And it's great. It's wonderful. And yeah, that's kind of the end of the movie.
Cut to credits.
I love that movie. The scenes that were hard. They had definitely some unrealistic bits.
Yeah.
And maybe the first hour could have been half an hour, because it was a very long film.
Almost 2.5 hours. Which for me didn't feel like too long until we get to the Lenny trying to rescue Faith montage. And then I suddenly became aware of how much movie was left.
Yeah. I was watching it with the like progress bar visible the entire time. And so every time I would just kind of like blink and step away from the movie mentally, I would look down and I'd be like, oh my God, we're not even halfway through. It takes a long while. I think because much like other movies that we've watched, like Free Jack, where it's a little bit more high concept, they spend a lot of time explaining to the audience all of the ins and outs of their technology, of the world that they set up, of all of these other things that they don't super trust the audience to fully get quickly. So they have to handhold you through it. So like, it's a great character introduction, but it goes on for far too long. So by the time the plot actually starts like kicking into overdrive, you're already like an hour into the movie.
Yeah, definitely that montage could have been cut down, or maybe even cut to just like a couple scenes. And I feel like some of the Faith stuff could have been cut out. We really got that point driven home with the Lenny reliving the memories. Honestly, I was a little disappointed the first time I watched it because I fell for the red herring. I was kind of expecting there to be something a little more closely resembling what's happening today. But on rewatch, I can definitely appreciate this movie more for the time it was made and for the mentality of that time.
In 1995, we were willing to believe that just a couple bad apples existed.
Yeah.
And they do comment on this sort of like widespread police brutality and the militarization of police, and a lot of the trends that were starting to be present in the mid-90s but really came to their fruition this year. This was the Clinton era, right? You had Law and Order, you had super criminals, you had all of the other sort of like pearl clutching things that politicians on both sides of the aisle would do in order to try to win, you know, real America.
Yeah, this is back when Tough on Crime was still seen as a good platform.
Yeah. Broken windows, whatever. People were not willing to address race in a significant way.
It was definitely a time when people were more willing to gloss over the systemic problems inherent to all of this.
Yeah. This was, like 2 or 3 years after Rodney King.
Rodney King was 92, and then the riots, and then it was even after O.J. Simpson's trial.
Yeah. So this was definitely a response to a lot of that, you know, leads to the logical conclusion of 2020. But America wasn't ready for it. America really wasn't ready to believe that it is a systemic issue.
So that's the version of the ending we got.
Yeah. The bad cops are gone. Good cops are taking care of the people who need to be taken care of, and our heroes will get justice.
Yeah, and I can kind of understand why this movie didn't take off, but at the same time it baffles me because it's just such a well-made thing. It's just a good movie.
Yeah, it's one of those things where if you can get past the violence, which for the time was pretty shocking and pretty brutal.
Yeah.
And it's still pretty shocking and brutal, but like we've had 20 something years of shocking and brutal violence, both on the big screen and on the small screen, to kind of like soften some of that.
Yeah.
Where we can look past it, and instead of just feeling the shock of it, we can actually like explore some of the themes and things in this at a bit more of a remove.
Yeah. And even on like a technical level, this was in planning for about 2 years, but it was only shot over 77 days. Like they really just got it done.
It's an amazing production. And of course they're going to invent new cameras because it's James Cameron. producing for his wife, and like
at that point she was his ex-wife. They were divorced for a year
were
or so,
they?
I think, at that point. Yeah.
But regardless, there's technical stuff that's really cool, and it's a really good movie. Like, it's just solid. I just wish it were a little shorter.
A little bit. I could have used more mace fight scenes, but that's just a me thing. But yeah, like the stunt at the beginning with the thief trying to jump the gap wasn't done with a safety harness. Took almost a year of planning by itself. Was done with a helmet cam and a steady cam.
Wow.
Wildest thing, though, is the list of actors who were considered for the role of Lenny. The only one I think really fit Lenny as a character was Ralph Fiennes. If I could just go over a few of them.
Sure.
All right, so Kurt Russell, Dennis Quaid, Bill Paxton, which I think he could have worked, Sean Penn, John Travolta, Patrick Swayze, Nicolas Cage, Andy Garcia, also kind of a good choice.
Yeah.
Bruce Willis, Mel Gibson, Jeff Bridges, Tom Cruise, Michael Keaton, Denzel Washington, and the most unbelievable of all, the one who would have absolutely ruined this movie if they had put him in it, I think, Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah. I thought you were going to say Bono from U2 because he was also in the running, and that would have been a nightmare.
Two dodged bullets right there.
Oh no, he was supposed to be Philo Gant. He would have actually been perfect for that.
That would have been great.
He has such a punchable face.
Yeah. I mean, Michael Wincott's amazing in that, but that would have been also good.
Ralph Fiennes has that perfect balance of like respectable, handsome, charming, but like, you know that he's getting away with something and you're just not sure what.
It vacillates between I can't believe you're doing this. It's like, I can't believe you're doing that.
Yeah. If someone was to just be allowed to get away with something, it would be him.
Yeah. And he does constantly throughout the whole movie. Like they really do a good job of showing that this is someone who uses his charm and his charisma to get away with things that anyone else would actually probably have the crap beaten out of them for trying.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think this is one we can both wholeheartedly recommend.
Yeah.
As long as you can handle the harder parts of it.
The hard parts are hard, but overall it presents a really interesting portrait of America's anxieties, both in terms of technology, in terms of social unrest, in terms of media culture. There's a lot in this movie to dissect and to mull over, and I think it's worth a watch in 2020.
And I mean, even if you can just get a hold of the soundtrack, it's just such a good soundtrack.
It is. It's in constant rotation in my car. I found it at a thrift store like 5 years ago, and it's Strange Days, Hackers, and they just like swap places.
Oh, and I found out why I probably just kind of like Iris, because she played Goliath's daughter in Gargoyles.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she voiced her. So, yeah, that was Strange Days. Kate, where can people find you on the internet?
You can find me at Army of Meat on Twitter. And where can people find you?
You can find me at Shard_Corso, SHARD_CORSO. If you have any suggestions for stuff we can cover, you can find us on Twitter at InterestingChoi6. INTRESTINGCHOI6. And we're now on Spreaker. You can find us at Spreaker.com/show/interesting-choices, or just go to Spreaker and search Interesting Choices, or your podcast service of choice such as Spotify or iTunes.
Yep. I think we'll probably be taking a break from the near future sci-fi dystopian films because we've had a lot of them recently.
Yeah, unintentional theme month, or intentional. Who knows? We'll never tell.
So, I guess we'll look forward to whatever we're going to do next time.
As always, thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.